I found my wife Elena tied to a chair in our basement, her body carved with symbols I'd only seen in cartel crime scenes. The message scrawled in her blood on the wall read, "Stop digging or join her." She'd been dead for 3 days while I was hunting the very monster who killed her. Hit like, subscribe for more betrayal stories, and comment your location. The smell hit me first. That metallic, sickening odor that every military police officer learns to recognize but never gets used to. I'd been tracking down leads on the Morales cartel for weeks, following tips that kept leading nowhere. Elena had been supporting me through it all, bringing me coffee during late-night case reviews, listening to my frustrations about dead ends. Except Elena hadn't been home when I returned from my latest stakeout. Her car was in the driveway, her purse on the kitchen counter, but the house felt wrong. Too quiet. Too still. "Elena," I called out, my voice echoing through rooms that suddenly felt foreign. "Honey, where are you?" That's when I noticed the basement door was ajar. We never went down there except to check the water heater. My service weapon was already in my hand before I consciously decided to draw it. 15 years of military police training doesn't just disappear, even when you're searching your own home. Each step down those wooden stairs felt like descending into hell. The smell grew stronger. My heart was hammering so hard I could barely hear anything else, but I forced myself to keep moving. At the bottom of the stairs, I reached for the light switch. What I saw will haunt me until the day I die. Elena was bound to one of our old dining room chairs, the one we'd moved down there months ago planning to refinish it. Her head hung forward, dark hair covering her face, but I could see the cuts. Precise, deliberate, the work of someone who enjoyed causing pain. My knees nearly buckled. This wasn't random violence. This wasn't a robbery gone wrong. The symbols carved into her arms were cartel markers, messages I'd studied in dozens of crime scene photos. But seeing them on my wife's body made my vision blur with rage and grief. I stumbled toward her, my training screaming at me to secure the scene, to call it in, to follow protocol. But this was Elena. My Elena. The woman who made pancakes every Sunday morning and hummed while she organized her research files. Research files. The thought hit me like a physical blow. Elena was an investigative journalist, one of the few in our city brave enough to dig into stories others wouldn't touch. She'd been working on something big for months, staying up late, making encrypted phone calls, meeting sources at coffee shops across town. I'd asked her about it once. "Just following the money trail," she'd said with that determined smile I fell in love with. Some local businesses might have ties to dirty money. Nothing dangerous, just financial stuff. Financial stuff. Money trails. Cartel connections. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone to call the crime scene unit. But before I could dial, I saw something that made my blood freeze. Tucked behind Elena's chair was her laptop, open and still running. The screen showed a document titled Morales Cartel Money Laundering Network, Final Draft. She hadn't been working on some minor financial story. She'd been investigating Diego Morales himself, the ghost we'd been chasing for 2 years. The man who'd ordered hits on judges, police officers, and anyone who got too close to his operation. And now he'd killed my wife. I scrolled through her notes with trembling fingers. Names, dates, financial transactions, photos of meetings. Elena had been building a case that could have brought down the entire organization. She'd found connections we'd missed, followed paper trails that led straight to the heart of their operation. But somewhere along the way, they'd found out what she was doing. The message on the wall became clearer now. Stop digging or join her. This wasn't just about Elena's investigation. They knew I was military police. They knew I'd been working the cartel cases. This was a warning and a punishment all at once. I forced myself to look at my wife one more time, memorizing every detail of what they'd done to her. The rage building in my chest wasn't the hot, explosive kind that leads to mistakes. It was cold, calculating, the kind of anger that could fuel a man through months of patient hunting. Diego Morales had made this personal. He'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. As I finally dialed for backup, One thought burned through my grief like acid. Elena had died protecting her story, but she'd also left me everything I needed to finish what she started. The hunt was about to begin. The crime scene unit finished processing my basement at 3 a.m., but I couldn't sleep. Elena's laptop sat on our kitchen table like a loaded weapon, and I knew once I opened it again, there would be no going back to the man I was before. Captain Rodriguez had ordered me to take bereavement leave, but I'd convinced him to let me stay on the case as a consultant. "You know the cartel better than anyone, Marcus," he'd said, his weathered face showing genuine sympathy. "But the moment this gets too personal, I'm pulling you." Too personal? My wife was carved up like a piece of meat and left for me to find. It was already as personal as it could get. I poured my fourth cup of coffee since midnight and opened Elena's files. Her investigation was brilliant, methodical, thorough, and absolutely damning. She'd traced money from street-level drug sales through a network of shell companies, legitimate businesses, and offshore accounts that all led back to Diego Morales. But it wasn't just the financial trail that impressed me. Elena had identified patterns in the cartel's behavior that we'd missed. She'd documented how they recruited new members, how they eliminated rivals, even how they chose their victims. Reading her notes felt like getting inside Morales' head. One entry made my hands shake. March 15th, they know I'm watching. Black SUV parked across from the coffee shop during my meeting with Maria Santos. Same vehicle outside our house yesterday when Marcus left for work. Diego's getting nervous. Good. Nervous people make mistakes. March 15th was 3 weeks ago. Elena had known she was being watched and hadn't told me. She'd kept working, kept digging, even knowing the danger. I found her backup drives hidden inside a hollowed-out cookbook. Classic Elena, hiding serious work inside something domestic. The drives contained hours of recorded phone calls, photographs taken with telephoto lenses, and financial documents that would make the FBI weep with joy. But the most valuable discovery was her source network. Elena had cultivated contacts throughout the city, waitresses who served cartel members, bank employees who processed suspicious transactions, even a few low-level cartel soldiers who'd grown tired of the violence. One name kept appearing in her notes: Isabella Cruz, a prosecutor who'd been secretly feeding Elena information about ongoing cartel investigations. If Isabella was still alive, she might be the key to understanding how deep the corruption went. My phone buzzed. Rodriguez. Marcus, we got movement on the Morales case. 3 of his known associates just turned up dead in a warehouse on the south side. Execution style, but not cartel methodology. Someone's hunting them. I felt a cold satisfaction. Any leads on who? That's the thing. The killer left evidence behind. Professional work, but they wanted us to know it was deliberate. Marcus, I need you to know something. Elena wasn't just investigating the cartel. According to these files we found, she was building a case against someone in our own department. The coffee cup slipped from my hand, shattering on the kitchen floor. What do you mean? Someone's been feeding information to Morales. Someone with access to our investigation files, our witness protection lists, our raid schedules. Elena was trying to figure out who. The room started spinning. If there was a mole in our unit, that meant Elena's death wasn't just retaliation for her investigation. It was orchestrated from the inside. Someone I worked with, someone I trusted, had given Morales the information he needed to find her. Rodriguez, I need those files. All of them. Marcus, Elena died because someone we work with sold her out. I'm not taking leave. I'm not stepping back. I'm going to find out who betrayed her, and then I'm going to find Morales. There was a long pause. 24 hours, Marcus. That's all I can give you before I have to follow protocol and bring in internal affairs. Find me something concrete. After he hung up, I sat in my kitchen surrounded by broken ceramic and the scattered pieces of my old life. Elena's investigation had revealed something bigger than we'd imagined, a network of corruption that reached into the heart of our own police force. But she'd also left me something else. In her final notes, dated the day before she died, Elena had written, If something happens to me, Marcus needs to contact Phoenix. He knows the truth about Diego. He knows who can't be trusted. Phoenix will find you when the time is right. Phoenix. Elena had never mentioned that name to me, but somehow I knew this mysterious contact was the key to everything. I gathered Elena's files, loaded fresh batteries into my recorder, and checked my service weapon. In 24 hours, I needed to identify a traitor, find a cartel leader, and somehow stay alive long enough to get justice for my wife. The hunt was no longer just about Diego Morales. It was about everyone who'd helped him destroy the woman I loved. The citywide manhunt for Diego Morales began at dawn. Rodriguez had assembled every available unit: military police, federal agents, local detectives, even Border Patrol. The operations center buzzed with activity as teams coordinated search patterns across the metropolitan area. I stood at the tactical board, marking known cartel safe houses with red pins. Each location represented months of surveillance work, but I knew Morales was too smart to hide in obvious places. Elena's research had taught me that he was a ghost for a reason, always 3 steps ahead, always anticipating law enforcement moves. Marcus, we've got positive ID on 3 vehicles associated with the Morales organization. Detective Harrison called from across the room. Black Escalade, silver Honda Civic, and a white panel van. All were spotted in the warehouse district where we found those bodies. I studied the map, remembering Elena's notes about cartel movement patterns. She'd identified a network of safe routes they used to move drugs and personnel through the city. The warehouse district was a hub, but not a destination. They're using the industrial zone as a transfer point, I said, tracing potential escape routes with my finger. Harrison, pull traffic camera footage from Highway 54 and the Port Authority access roads. If Morales is running, he'll need to reach the coast or the Mexican border. My phone vibrated. Unknown number. I stepped away from the command center to answer. You're Elena's husband. The voice was female, nervous, with a slight accent. She told me to contact you if something happened to her. My pulse quickened. Who is this? Meet me at Riverside Park, near the old boat launch. Come alone. I have information about Phoenix and about who killed your wife. The line went dead. I stared at the phone, weighing my options. This could be a trap, but it could also be the breakthrough we needed. Elena had prepared for her own death by setting up contingency contacts. This woman might be one of them. I told Rodriguez I was following up on a lead and would check in within 2 hours. He nodded absently, focused on coordinating the search teams. If I was walking into danger, at least someone would notice if I didn't return. Riverside Park was 20 minutes away through city traffic. As I drove, memories of Elena flooded back. She'd loved this park, especially in autumn when the leaves changed colors. We'd walked these paths dozens of times, talking about cases, planning our future, dreaming about the kids we wanted to have someday. Those dreams died with her in our basement. The boat launch area was deserted except for a lone woman sitting on a weathered bench. She was young, maybe late 20s, with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. Her clothes were simple but clean: jeans, a jacket, sneakers suitable for running. Everything about her posture suggested she was ready to bolt at the first sign of trouble. You came, she said without looking at me as I approached. Elena said you would. She said you were the only cop in this city she trusted completely. I sat on the opposite end of the bench, giving her space. What's your name? Isabella. Isabella Cruz. She finally turned to face me, and I saw the fear in her eyes. I'm the prosecutor who was helping Elena build her case against the Morales cartel. The name clicked into place. Elena had mentioned Isabella dozens of times in her notes, but she'd never described meeting her in person. This was the woman who'd been feeding Elena inside information about cartel prosecutions. Elena's dead because of information she got from me, Isabella continued, her voice breaking slightly. I gave her access to financial records, witness statements, evidence files. She was so close to exposing the whole network. Tell me about Phoenix. Isabella's eyes widened. You don't know? Elena never told you. She shook her head sadly. Phoenix isn't a person, Marcus. It's an operation. A joint task force between military police, FBI, and DEA that's been investigating cartel corruption for 2 years. Elena was our civilian consultant. The world tilted sideways. Elena hadn't stumbled into investigating the cartel. She'd been recruited. Why didn't she tell me? Because Phoenix suspected there was a mole in your unit. Elena was supposed to identify the leak while building the financial case against Morales. She couldn't risk telling you because we didn't know who could be trusted. Everything clicked into place. Elena's late nights, her secretive phone calls, her careful questions about my cases. She hadn't been hiding her investigation from me. She'd been protecting me from becoming a target while she worked to expose corruption in my own department. Who's the mole? We don't know yet. Elena was close to identifying them when she was killed. But we know it's someone with access to high-level operational information. Someone who's been feeding Morales details about raids, witness locations, evidence collection. Isabella reached into her jacket and pulled out a small digital recorder. Elena made this 3 days before she died. She wanted you to have it if something happened to her. I took the recorder with trembling hands. Elena's voice filled the air, clear and determined despite the static. Marcus, if you're hearing this, then they found me before I could finish the job. The mole in your unit has been protecting Morales for at least 18 months. They knew about the Martinez raid, the Gonzalez safe house operation, and the witness protection details for Maria Santos. 3 people have died because of leaked information. Elena's voice paused, and I could hear her take a shaky breath. I've narrowed it down to 3 suspects: Detective Williams, Sergeant Thompson, and Captain Rodriguez. One of them is dirty, Marcus. One of them helped kill me. Phoenix has been building a parallel case, but we need the financial evidence to make arrests stick. Everything you need is in my files under the folder marked Wedding Photos. I love you, Marcus. Finish what I started. The recording ended, leaving Isabella and me sitting in stunned silence. My captain, my sergeant, my partner. One of them had betrayed not just the department, but Elena personally. Marcus, Isabella said quietly, there's something else. Phoenix intercepted communications yesterday. Morales isn't running from the city. He's planning something big. Something that's going to happen in the next 48 hours. I stood up, my mind racing through implications and possibilities. Elena's death wasn't just retaliation, it was preparation. Morales had eliminated the one person who could expose his network because he needed that network intact for whatever he was planning. I need to get back to the command center, I said. But first, I need you to contact Phoenix. Tell them I know about the operation, and I'm ready to work with them. Tell them Elena's husband is ready to finish the job. As I walked back to my car, Elena's voice echoed in my mind. She died protecting me, died keeping secrets that could have saved her life. But she'd also left me everything I needed to bring down the people responsible. The hunt for Diego Morales had just become something much bigger and much more dangerous. The command center felt different when I returned. Every face looked suspicious now. Every conversation could be feeding information to Morales. Elena's recording had named 3 suspects, and 2 of them were in this room coordinating the manhunt for the man who killed my wife. Captain Rodriguez was studying surveillance photos when I approached his desk. Find anything useful on your lead, Marcus? I watched his eyes carefully. Dead end. False alarm. The lie came easily, but I noticed how Rodriguez's shoulders relaxed slightly. Was that relief, or just normal disappointment? We've had better luck here, he said, spreading the photos across his desk. Traffic cameras caught the silver Honda at 3 different locations in the past 6 hours. Morales is moving in a pattern, but we can't figure out what he's targeting. I studied the images. The Honda had been spotted near the courthouse, the federal building, and the main police precinct. 3 high-security locations with heavy law enforcement presence. Either Morales was scouting targets, or he was sending a message. Where's Detective Williams? I asked casually, following up on a tip about the panel van. Should be back within the hour. Williams, one of Elena's 3 suspects. If he was dirty, Sending him out alone to chase leads gave him perfect opportunity to communicate with Morales without supervision. My phone buzzed with a text from Isabella. Phoenix wants to meet. Midnight. Old brewery on Industrial Street. Come alone. I deleted the message and focused on the surveillance photos. Elena had taught me to look for patterns, and something about these locations nagged at me. The courthouse, federal building, police precinct, they weren't random targets. They were symbols of the justice system that had been hunting Morales. Captain, what if he's not planning to hit these buildings? I said, what if he's studying our response patterns? Learning how we deploy resources, how long it takes backup to arrive. Rodriguez frowned. You think he's planning to draw us into an ambush? Before I could answer, Sergeant Thompson burst through the door. We've got multiple shots fired at the Port Authority. 2 officers down, suspects fleeing in the white panel van. The command center exploded into activity. Rodriguez started barking orders, dispatching every available unit to the port. I grabbed my gear and headed for the door, but something made me pause. Thompson had delivered the news, but I hadn't seen him answer a phone or radio call. How had he gotten the information so quickly? And why were his hands shaking? I followed the convoy toward the port, but took a different route, one of the back roads Elena had identified in her cartel research. If this was an ambush, Morales would have escape routes planned. The port was chaos when I arrived. 2 patrol cars were riddled with bullet holes, their officers being loaded into ambulances. The white panel van sat abandoned near warehouse number 7, its doors open and interior empty. Suspects fled on foot into the warehouse district. Detective Williams reported when I found him coordinating the search. 9 units are tracking them now. Something felt wrong about the whole scene. Too clean, too orchestrated. Morales was many things, but sloppy wasn't one of them. He wouldn't abandon a vehicle unless he wanted us to find it. I circled around to the back of Warehouse 7 and found what I was looking for, fresh tire tracks leading away from a loading dock. While we were searching the abandoned van, the real escape vehicle had been waiting at a predetermined pickup point. My radio crackled. All units, we have eyes on 3 suspects moving through Warehouse District. Setting up perimeter. I followed the tire tracks instead of joining the search. Elena's voice echoed in my memory. Follow the evidence, not the crowd. The tracks led away from the port, toward the old industrial section where legitimate businesses mixed with abandoned buildings. 20 minutes later, I found the silver Honda parked behind a defunct auto parts store. The engine was still warm. Fresh footprints led from the car to a side entrance of the building. I called for backup, but didn't wait for arrival. Elena had died while I was chasing shadows. I wasn't going to let Morales slip away again. The building's interior was a maze of empty offices and storage rooms. I moved carefully, weapon drawn, following the sound of voices deeper into the structure. Elena's training had taught me patience, but my rage demanded action. I found them in what used to be the main showroom. 3 men huddled around a table covered with maps and surveillance photos. Diego Morales was smaller than I'd expected, maybe 5'8" with graying hair and expensive clothes. He looked more like a businessman than a killer. The police response was exactly as predicted. One of his men was saying, 37 minutes from initial call to full perimeter establishment. Thompson's information was accurate. Thompson, Sergeant Thompson, one of Elena's 3 suspects, had provided response time information to help Morales plan his operations. Morales looked up from the maps, and for a moment, our eyes met through the grimy window I was watching from. He smiled, not the grin of a surprised criminal, but the satisfied expression of a man whose trap had just been sprung. Officer Rivera, he called out in accented English. Please join us. We've been expecting you. My blood ran cold. This wasn't a coincidence. The abandoned van, the tire tracks, the warm engine, all of it had been designed to lead me here. Morales hadn't been running from us. He'd been hunting me. Your wife was very brave, Morales continued, his voice echoing through the empty building. She refused to tell us about Phoenix even when my men became creative with their questions. But she did mention how much she loved you, how devoted you were to justice. I backed away from the window, but it was too late. Footsteps echoed from multiple directions as Morales' men moved to surround the building. I'd walked into exactly the kind of trap Elena would have warned me about. My radio was dead, no signal in the old building's steel-reinforced structure. Backup wouldn't find me until it was too late. As I searched for an escape route, I realized Morales had been playing a much longer game than any of us understood. The manhunt, the abandoned vehicles, even the attack on the port, all of it had been designed to isolate me and draw me into this moment. Elena's killer wasn't running from justice. He was orchestrating his final act of revenge against the system that had been hunting him. And I had just become his closing argument. The abandoned auto parts store had become my tomb. I could hear Morales' men positioning themselves at every exit, their footsteps echoing through the hollow building like a countdown to my execution. But Elena's training had taught me something valuable. Never panic when cornered. Think. Observe. Find the weakness. I pressed myself against the wall and studied the building's layout. Old industrial structures like this always had emergency exits, maintenance tunnels, or loading dock access that wasn't visible from the main floor. Elena had researched dozens of buildings for her cartel investigation, and she'd taught me to look for the details criminals missed. There, a service ladder in the corner leading to what looked like an old ventilation system. If I could reach the roof, I might have a chance. Officer Rivera, Morales called again, his voice closer now. There's no need for this to be unpleasant. Your wife's death was business, nothing personal. But what happens next depends entirely on how cooperative you choose to be. I started climbing the ladder, moving as quietly as possible. Each rung brought me closer to potential freedom, but also further from any backup that might eventually arrive. You see, your Phoenix operation has been a source of great inconvenience for my organization, Morales continued, apparently enjoying the sound of his own voice. But it's also been quite educational. Amazing what people will reveal when they think they're safe. The ventilation shaft was narrow but navigable. I crawled forward through decades of dust and debris, following a faint breeze that suggested an exterior opening ahead. My phone buzzed, somehow getting signal through the old ductwork. Text message from an unknown number. Marcus, this is Phoenix Command. We know you're compromised. Emergency extraction team en route to your location. Stay alive for 8 minutes. 8 minutes. I could manage 8 minutes if I stayed hidden and avoided direct confrontation. But then I heard something that made my blood freeze. Sergeant Thompson should be arriving soon with backup, Morales was saying. He's been quite helpful in keeping us informed about police operations. Amazing how easy it is to buy loyalty when someone has gambling debts and a sick wife. Thompson. Elena had suspected him, and now I had confirmation. But hearing it spoken aloud by my wife's killer filled me with a rage that threatened to override tactical thinking. I reached the end of the ventilation shaft and found myself looking down through a grate at the building's back alley. The drop was manageable, maybe 15 feet to a dumpster below. But as I prepared to break through the grate, I heard voices approaching from outside. Buildings secured, boss, someone was saying. Rivera's trapped inside. No way out except through us. Excellent, replied a voice I recognized with certainty. Sergeant Thompson. Officer Rivera has been under significant stress since his wife's death. Tragic when good cops break down and make poor decisions. They were setting up my murder to look like suicide by cop. A grieving husband, overwhelmed by loss, charging into a dangerous situation without backup. The story would write itself. I activated my phone's recording app and positioned it near the grate's opening. If I didn't survive the next few minutes, at least there would be evidence of Thompson's betrayal. The Phoenix operation dies with him, Thompson continued. Isabella Cruz had an unfortunate car accident this morning. Brakes failed on a mountain road. Very sad. With Rivera gone, there won't be anyone left who knows the full scope of Elena's investigation. Isabella was dead. The prosecutor who'd risked everything to help Elena expose cartel corruption had been murdered while I was walking into Morales' trap. How many more people would die because of secrets Elena had uncovered? Through the grate, I watched Thompson position his men around the building's perimeter. He was coordinating with Morales people like they were all part of the same team. The corruption went deeper than Elena had imagined. Not just information leaks, but active collaboration between law enforcement and the cartel. My phone buzzed again. Phoenix extraction delayed. Local traffic stop preventing approach. Hold position for 12 more minutes. 12 minutes might as well have been 12 hours. Thompson's people would storm the building soon, and when they did, they'd find me trapped in a ventilation shaft like a rat. But Elena's voice echoed in my memory. When you can't run and you can't hide, change the game. I pulled out my service weapon and checked the ammunition. Full clip +1 in the chamber. Not enough for a sustained firefight, but maybe enough to create the chaos I needed. I aimed carefully through the grate and put 2 rounds into the rear tire of Thompson's patrol car. The shots echoed through the alley like thunder, and suddenly everyone was shouting and scrambling for cover. "Shooter on the roof," someone yelled. "North side, high angle. Move, move, move." In the confusion, I kicked out the grate and dropped into the alley. The dumpster broke my fall, but the impact still knocked the wind out of me. I rolled behind a parked car just as Thompson's men began firing at the roof where they thought I was hiding. "He's not up there," Thompson shouted. "Check the alley. Check everywhere." I had maybe 30 seconds before they reorganized and found me. The mouth of the alley opened onto Industrial Street. If I could reach it, there was cover and concealment among the other abandoned buildings. But as I prepared to make my run, I heard something that stopped me cold. Elena's voice, crackling through a radio transmission. "Marcus, can you hear me? I'm trapped in the basement." They know about Phoenix. They know about everything. It was a recording. Thompson was playing a recording of Elena's final moments, the desperate call she'd made before Morales' men killed her. "She called you for help," Thompson continued over the radio. "Called her husband, her protector, the man who was supposed to keep her safe. But you weren't there, were you, Marcus? You were out chasing shadows while she died alone in your own basement." The psychological warfare was brutal and effective. Guilt and rage roared in my chest, threatening to overwhelm tactical thinking. Thompson knew exactly how to break me down. But Elena's training had prepared me for this too. "Don't let them make it personal," she'd always said. "Personal emotions lead to tactical mistakes." I forced myself to think like the investigator Elena had trained me to be. Thompson was trying to provoke me into making a mistake, which meant he was worried about something. The Phoenix extraction team, the evidence Elena had hidden, or something else I hadn't considered yet. Through the radio chatter, I heard Morales giving orders. Burn it all. The building, the evidence, everything. Make it look like Rivera started a fire trying to destroy cartel documents. They were going to eliminate all traces of Elena's investigation along with me. Years of work, dozens of sources, financial records that could have brought down the entire network. All of it would disappear in smoke and flame. But Elena had been smarter than that. She'd hidden backup copies of everything, and she'd told me where to find them. If I could survive the next few minutes, I could still finish what she'd started. The smell of gasoline filled the alley as Morales' men began dousing the auto parts building. They weren't just planning to kill me. They were going to erase every trace of Elena's investigation along with my body. But hiding behind that rusted car, watching my wife's killers prepare to destroy her life's work, something fundamental shifted inside me. I wasn't a military police officer anymore. I wasn't following protocols or waiting for backup. I was a husband who'd failed to protect the woman he loved, and I was done playing by rules that had gotten Elena killed. My phone showed 4 minutes until Phoenix extraction. 4 minutes was too long to wait while they burned evidence that could bring justice for Elena and Isabella and every other victim of this corruption network. I ejected the clip from my service weapon and counted rounds. 17 bullets between the clip and chamber. Thompson had at least 6 men positioned around the building, plus Morales and his crew inside. Not great odds, but Elena had taught me that superior firepower wasn't everything. Knowledge is your best weapon, she'd always said. Know your enemy better than they know themselves. I knew Thompson's tactics from years of working together. He was methodical, by the book, always set up secure perimeters before advancing. That predictability was about to become his weakness. Moving low and fast, I circled around to the building's east side where Thompson had positioned his youngest officer, Kevin Martinez, fresh out of academy, nervous under pressure. Elena had profiled every cop in our unit for her investigation, and she'd noted that Martinez always positioned himself too close to corners, creating blind spots. I was right. Martinez was crouched behind a concrete barrier, watching the main entrance but ignoring the service door 10 feet to his left. I approached from his blind side, moving with the stealth techniques Elena had helped me practice during her research into cartel operations. "Martinez," I whispered, pressing my weapon against the back of his neck. "Don't move. Don't speak." He froze, his radio halfway to his mouth. "Elena trusted you," I continued quietly. "Said you were one of the good ones. Was she right?" Martinez nodded slowly, his hands shaking. "Thompson's dirty. He's working with Morales. He helped kill my wife." I could hear the raw emotion in my own voice. "Are you with them, or are you going to help me stop this?" I didn't know," Martinez whispered. "Thompson said you'd snapped, said you were dangerous. But Elena always treated me fair, always had my back when other cops looked down on rookies." "Then prove it. Give me your radio and your backup weapon." Martinez handed over both items without hesitation. "What do you need me to do?" "Create a distraction. Make them think you've spotted me moving toward the north entrance. Give me 60 seconds, then get clear of the building. Phoenix extraction is coming, but Thompson's planning to kill everyone who knows about Elena's investigation." Martinez nodded grimly. Elena was good people. She didn't deserve what happened to her. I took his radio and moved toward the service entrance while Martinez began his performance. "Possible contact, north side. Rivera's moving toward the main building." Through the radio chatter, I heard Thompson redirecting his men toward Martinez's fake sighting. Classic misdirection, another technique Elena had taught me from studying cartel tactics. The service door was unlocked, probably because Morales wanted me to have access to the building for his final confrontation. I slipped inside and found myself in what used to be the parts storage area. Shelves lined the walls, creating natural cover and concealment. Elena's voice echoed in my memory as I moved through the building. "Always have an exit strategy. Always know your surroundings. Never let emotion override tactical thinking." But as I got deeper into the building, emotion was exactly what was driving me. The smell of gasoline was stronger here, and I could hear Morales giving orders to his men. "When the building burns, make sure Rivera's body is found near the evidence boxes. Make it look like he was trying to destroy cartel documents when the fire started." Evidence boxes. Elena's investigation materials were still here, and Morales was planning to use them to frame me posthumously. But that meant they hadn't destroyed everything yet. I followed the voices to the main showroom, where I'd first spotted Morales through the window. Now I could see the full scope of their operation. Boxes of Elena's research stacked against one wall, multiple containers of accelerant positioned around the room, and 3 men with automatic weapons guarding the exits. Morales stood in the center of it all like a director orchestrating his masterpiece. "Your Phoenix friends are quite resourceful," he was saying to someone on his phone. "But eliminating Rivera and burning this evidence will set their investigation back years. By the time they rebuild their case, I'll be running operations from somewhere much more hospitable." He was planning to disappear after tonight. Elena's death, Isabella's murder, my execution, all of it was just cleanup before Morales vanished with his network intact. But Elena had anticipated this possibility. In her final notes, she'd written about contingency plans, backup evidence stored in multiple locations, trusted contacts who could continue the investigation if she was eliminated. I activated Martinez's radio and switched to the Phoenix command frequency Isabella had given me. Phoenix command, this is Marcus Rivera. I'm inside the target building with visual confirmation on Diego Morales. Multiple suspects present, evidence of planned arson. Requesting immediate tactical support. Rivera, this is Phoenix Actual, came the reply. We have teams in position but cannot approach due to corrupt local law enforcement on scene. We need you to create separation between hostile forces and evidence materials. Create separation. That was military speak for start a firefight and hope we can extract you before you die. Elena would have had a better plan. She would have found a way to preserve the evidence, capture Morales alive, and expose Thompson's corruption all at once. But Elena had been brilliant at strategy, while I was just a soldier who'd lost everything worth fighting for. Except that wasn't entirely true. I was fighting for Elena's legacy, for Isabella's sacrifice, for every victim of the corruption network my wife had died trying to expose. I moved closer to the evidence boxes, staying in the shadows between old shelving units. If I could secure Elena's research materials and create enough chaos for Phoenix to intervene, maybe her death wouldn't be meaningless. But as I prepared to make my move, I heard Thompson's voice coming from the building's main entrance. Rivera, I know you're in here. Let's end this like professionals. Thompson was inside the building now, along with however many corrupt cops were working with him. I was trapped between Morales cartel soldiers and dirty police officers, with boxes of gasoline-soaked evidence between me and any possible escape route. Elena's final lesson echoed in my mind. When you can't win by the rules, change the game entirely. I pulled out my lighter and smiled grimly. If they wanted to burn the evidence, I'd give them a fire they'd never forget. The lighter felt cold in my hand as I crouched behind the evidence boxes, surrounded by enough accelerant to turn the building into an inferno. But Elena's voice stopped me before I could strike the flame. Evidence destroyed is justice denied. Find another way. She was right, even in death. Burning Elena's research wouldn't hurt Morales. It would complete his plan to erase years of investigation. I needed to think like Elena, not like a grieving husband bent on revenge. I studied the room's layout through the shadows. Morales had positioned his men to control the exits, but he'd made a tactical error. The evidence boxes were stacked near the building's main support beam, and the accelerant containers were concentrated in the center of the room. If I could create a controlled explosion in the right location, I might be able to bring down part of the ceiling while leaving the evidence intact. But first, I needed to get Morales talking. Elena had always said criminals love to explain their cleverness, especially when they thought they'd won. Morales, I called out from my hiding spot. You made this personal when you killed my wife. She was just a journalist doing her job. His laughter echoed through the showroom. Just a journalist? Officer Rivera, your wife was far more dangerous than any soldier I've faced. She understood my operation better than most of my own lieutenants. She understood that you're a coward who tortures innocent women. Innocent. Morales' voice shifted, becoming colder. Your Elena was building a case that would have destroyed not just my organization, but the delicate balance that keeps this city's drug trade manageable. Do you know what happens when you eliminate established cartels without replacing their infrastructure? Thompson's voice joined the conversation from near the main entrance. Chaos, Marcus. Smaller gangs fighting for territory, more violence, more civilian casualties. Sometimes the devil you know is better than the devil you don't. I moved carefully between the shelving units, trying to get a better angle on both men. So you justified murder by calling it harm reduction? I justified protecting my family, Thompson replied. You think I wanted to work with these people? My wife needs medical treatment that costs more than a sergeant's salary. My daughter's college fund was empty. Morales offered solutions to problems you've never had to face. The personal revelation hit harder than I'd expected. Thompson wasn't just a corrupt cop. He was a desperate father who'd made increasingly bad choices to protect the people he loved. It was exactly the kind of human complexity Elena would have understood and documented. Elena knew about your wife's cancer, I said, remembering notes from her investigation files. She was trying to find legal ways to help you before she realized you were feeding information to Morales. Silence stretched through the building. Then Thompson's voice, quieter now. She offered to help? Elena believed cops should take care of each other. Even when she suspected you were dirty, she was looking for ways to get your wife better treatment through department insurance programs. More silence. I could hear Morales moving, probably repositioning his men while Thompson processed this information. It doesn't matter now, Thompson finally said, but his voice lacked conviction. Too much has happened. Too many lines have been crossed. The only line that matters is the one between justice and revenge, I replied, channeling Elena's voice. She died trying to save this city from corruption. Don't let her death be meaningless. My radio crackled with Phoenix frequency. Rivera, we have sniper overwatch on the building. Can you provide target identification for primary suspect? I keyed the mic quietly. Morales is center of main showroom. Armed guards at north and east exits. Sergeant Thompson at main entrance. Unknown loyalties. Evidence materials stacked near structural support beam, west wall. Copy. Initiating operation in 60 seconds. Recommend you secure evidence and prepare for extraction. 60 seconds. I had 1 minute to somehow get Elena's research materials away from the accelerant and create enough separation to survive whatever Phoenix had planned. But as I prepared to move, I heard something that changed everything. Elena's voice, coming through Morales' radio. Marcus, if you're hearing this, then my final contingency has been activated. The evidence you're trying to protect is just a small portion of what I discovered. The real files are already in FBI custody, along with recordings of every conversation I had with my Phoenix contacts. It was another recording, but this one I'd never heard before. Elena had planned for this exact scenario. The materials in that building are decoys, designed to draw out the corruption network when I was eliminated. Everyone who shows up tonight, everyone who tries to destroy those fake files, is identifying themselves as part of the conspiracy. Morales cursed in Spanish, his voice rising to a shout. Impossible. We monitored her communications. We tracked her sources. You tracked what I wanted you to track, Elena's recorded voice continued. The real investigation was conducted through channels you never suspected. Diego, by the time you hear this, federal agents are already moving against your financial network. Thompson, your cooperation tonight will determine whether your family receives witness protection or visits you in federal prison. The building erupted into chaos. Morales began shouting orders to his men, while Thompson's radio crackled with confused voices from corrupt officers who'd suddenly realized they'd walked into a federal sting operation. Through the windows, I could see laser sights painting targets throughout the showroom. Phoenix wasn't just planning an extraction, they were preparing to clean house. But in the middle of the tactical operation, all I could think about was Elena's final gift to me. Even in death, she'd been 3 steps ahead of everyone. The evidence boxes I'd been trying to protect were bait. The real investigation materials were already safe, already in the hands of people who could use them to bring justice. My wife had orchestrated the destruction of the corruption network from beyond the grave. Elena, I whispered into the chaos, you magnificent, brilliant woman. Morales' voice cut through the noise. If the real evidence is already compromised, then killing Rivera serves no purpose except personal satisfaction. But sometimes, Officer Rivera, personal satisfaction is enough. The laser sights converged on my position as Morales raised his weapon. Through the scope, I could see his eyes, cold, calculating, and filled with the promise of violence. Elena had saved her investigation, but she couldn't save me from this final confrontation with her killer. The red laser danced across my chest as Morales took aim, but before he could fire, the building's windows exploded inward in a cascade of glass and smoke. Phoenix tactical teams breached from 3 directions simultaneously, their voices cutting through the chaos with professional precision. Federal agents, drop your weapons. Get on the ground now. I rolled behind the nearest concrete pillar as gunfire erupted throughout the showroom. Morales' men returned fire, but they were outgunned and outmaneuvered by operators who'd been planning this assault for hours. Through the tactical chaos, I heard Thompson's voice over the radio. All units, this is Sergeant Thompson. I'm surrendering to federal custody. Repeat, I am cooperating with federal agents. Smart move. Elena's recording had made it clear that cooperation was his only path to protecting his family. But Morales wasn't interested in surrender. Even as his organization crumbled around him, he kept moving toward my position with single-minded determination. This wasn't about escaping justice anymore. It was about finishing what he'd started when he tortured my wife. Rivera, he called out between bursts of gunfire. Your Elena died begging for you to save her. She called your name right until the end. The psychological warfare hit its mark. Rage flooded through me, threatening to override the tactical discipline Elena had helped me develop. But her voice cut through the emotion. Don't let them make it personal. Personal emotions lead to tactical mistakes. I forced myself to breathe, to think, to observe. Morales was moving in a predictable pattern, using the same cover and advanced techniques his men had been trained in. Elena's research had documented Cartel tactical methods extensively. I knew how he would move before he did. A Phoenix sniper's bullet took out one of Morales' guards, and suddenly the Cartel leader was isolated near the center of the showroom. He spun around, looking for escape routes, but federal agents had every exit covered. That's when I saw the detonator in his left hand. If I can't escape, Morales shouted over the gunfire, then we all burn together. The accelerant containers. Even though Elena's evidence was fake, the gasoline was real. Morales could still turn the building into an inferno that would kill everyone inside. I had maybe 3 seconds before he triggered the device. Elena's training kicked in automatically. Distance, angle, target acquisition. My service weapon came up smooth and steady, muscle memory guiding the sight picture. But as my finger touched the trigger, time seemed to slow. This was the man who had tortured my wife, who had carved symbols into her skin while she begged for mercy, who had left her body for me to find in our basement like a grotesque calling card. The shot was clean, center mass, no hesitation. Morales stumbled backward, the detonator flying from his hand to clatter across the concrete floor. But he wasn't finished. Blood spreading across his chest, Morales pulled a backup weapon and aimed it directly at me. Your wife tasted fear before she died. The second shot came from a Phoenix sniper positioned outside the building. Morales' head snapped back, and he collapsed beside the evidence boxes he'd planned to burn. Elena's killer was dead, but the victory felt hollow. Justice, served through violence, would never bring her back or heal the wounds his corruption network had inflicted on our city. Rivera, you secure? The Phoenix team leader was crouched beside me, checking for injuries. I'm fine, but I wasn't fine. Watching Morales die hadn't provided the satisfaction I'd expected. If anything, it felt like losing the last connection to Elena's investigation. We need you to identify evidence materials and provide testimony about tonight's operation, the team leader continued. Your wife's work is going to bring down one of the largest corruption networks we've ever documented. As federal agents secured the scene and processed the surviving suspects, I found myself staring at the boxes of fake evidence Elena had used as bait. Even in death, she'd been orchestrating events with the same methodical brilliance that had made her such an effective investigative journalist. But there was something else in those boxes, something the federal agents hadn't found yet. I opened the container marked wedding photos and found Elena's final message, written in her careful handwriting on a piece of notebook paper. Marcus, if you're reading this, then the operation was successful and you survived the confrontation with Diego. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you about Phoenix while I was alive, but protecting you meant keeping you ignorant of the investigation's true scope. You were never the target, my love. You were the witness. Everything that happened tonight was designed to force the corruption network into the open where federal agents could document their crimes. Your grief, your anger, your pursuit of justice. All of it was necessary to make the sting operation believable. I know this feels like manipulation, and maybe it was. But it was also the only way to ensure that my death would accomplish something meaningful. Thompson will testify against other corrupt officers. Morales' financial network will be dismantled. The city will be safer because of what we sacrificed. Don't blame yourself for not protecting me. Blame yourself for not believing I was strong enough to protect both of us. Finish the story, Marcus. Tell the world what really happened here. All my love, Elena. I read the letter 3 times before the full implications sank in. Elena hadn't just been investigating the cartel. She'd been using her own murder as bait to expose the entire corruption network. Everything from her death to my pursuit of justice had been choreographed to force the guilty parties into revealing themselves. My wife had sacrificed her life to save our city, and she'd done it knowing I would blame myself for failing to protect her. The Phoenix team leader approached as I folded Elena's letter carefully. Rivera, we're going to need extensive debriefing about your wife's investigation methods. Her work is going to be studied in law enforcement academies for decades. She was always smarter than everyone else in the room, I said quietly. I just never realized how smart until now. As federal agents led Thompson and the surviving cartel members away in handcuffs, I stood in the burned-out shell of the auto parts building and tried to process everything that had happened. Elena was still dead. Isabella was still dead. Justice had been served, but the people I'd loved were never coming back. But they had died for something bigger than themselves. The corruption network that had poisoned our city's law enforcement was broken. Future victims would be spared because of Elena's sacrifice. It would have to be enough. It was all I had left. 3 weeks after the warehouse operation, I stood in the federal courthouse watching the final pieces of Elena's investigation come together. The courtroom was packed with reporters, federal agents, and families of cartel victims who'd finally have their day in justice. Thompson sat at the defendant's table in an orange jumpsuit, his lawyer whispering urgently in his ear. The sergeant who'd once been my trusted colleague looked 10 years older, his face hollow with the weight of his betrayals. But he was talking, providing testimony that would dismantle corruption networks throughout the city. Your Honor, the federal prosecutor was saying, Sergeant Thompson's cooperation has led to the arrest of 12 additional law enforcement officers, the seizure of $47 million in cartel assets, and the disruption of drug trafficking operations across 3 states. I watched from the gallery as Thompson's wife entered the courtroom, her face gaunt from months of cancer treatment. Their teenage daughter held her mother's arm, both of them avoiding eye contact with the man who'd destroyed their family to try to save it. The irony wasn't lost on me. Thompson had betrayed his oath to protect his family, while Elena had upheld hers even knowing it would cost her life. Both had made impossible choices driven by love, but only Elena's sacrifice had accomplished something meaningful. During a recess, I found myself face-to-face with Thompson in the hallway outside the courtroom. Federal marshals flanked him, but they allowed us a moment to talk. Marcus, he said quietly, I know there's nothing I can say that will bring Elena back or make this right. You're right. There isn't. But I want you to know, when Elena offered to help my wife get better medical treatment, it was the first time in months someone had shown us kindness without wanting something in return. If I'd trusted her instead of Morales. Elena knew you were in an impossible situation, I interrupted. She documented your family's medical bills, your mortgage payments, your daughter's college fund. She understood why you made the choices you did. Thompson's eyes filled with tears. She was trying to save me even after she suspected I was dirty. Elena believed people could change. She believed in second chances and redemption. I paused, choosing my words carefully. Your cooperation is giving her investigation the ending she would have wanted. That matters. The federal marshal stepped forward. Time's up, gentlemen. As they led Thompson away, I realized this conversation had provided something I hadn't expected, not closure exactly, but understanding. Elena's compassion had extended even to the people who'd betrayed her. It was a reminder of why I'd fallen in love with her in the first place. Back in the courtroom, the judge was reading Thompson's sentence, 27 years in federal prison, with possibility of parole after 18 years contingent on continued cooperation with federal investigations. Thompson's daughter broke down sobbing. His wife sat stoically, her hand pressed to her mouth. A family destroyed by choices made in desperation and fear. But Elena's family, our family, had been destroyed too. The difference was that her sacrifice had prevented other families from suffering the same fate. After the hearing, I walked to Elena's grave in Riverside Cemetery. The headstone was simple granite with her name, dates, and the inscription I'd chosen. Beloved wife, fearless journalist, guardian of truth. Isabella Cruz was buried 3 plots over, her headstone reading, "She fought for justice until the end." The prosecutor's family had requested a simple service, but Phoenix had ensured her sacrifice was recognized with full honors. I placed fresh flowers on both graves and sat in the grass between them. 2 women who died fighting corruption, their investigations intertwined in ways that had ultimately saved countless lives. My phone buzzed with a text from the Phoenix team leader. "Final briefing tomorrow, 0800 hours. We have an offer to discuss." An offer. For weeks, federal agents had been hinting that Elena's investigative techniques could be valuable for future operations. They wanted me to consider joining Phoenix as a civilian consultant, using what Elena had taught me to help expose corruption in other cities. "What do you think, Elena?" I asked the headstone. "Ready to take our show on the road?" A warm breeze rustled through the cemetery trees, carrying the scent of jasmine from Elena's favorite flower bed. It wasn't an answer, but it felt like permission to keep fighting the battles she could no longer fight herself. The next morning, I sat across from Phoenix Command in a secure conference room, reviewing files on corruption investigations in Miami, Detroit, and Phoenix itself. Each case showed the same patterns Elena had identified: financial networks, information leaks, good cops caught between impossible choices. "Your wife's techniques were revolutionary," the team leader explained. "Using investigative journalism as cover for federal operations, developing civilian sources, building financial cases that complement traditional law enforcement methods. We want to expand that model." "Elena did the work," I said. "I just watched her do it." "You did more than watch. Her final reports credit you with tactical insights that shaped how she approached dangerous sources. You understand both sides, law enforcement and investigative journalism. That's rare." I thought about Elena's letter, her final instruction to finish the story. Maybe this was how I finished it, by ensuring her methods survived to fight corruption wherever it festered. "What exactly are you offering?" "Consultant position, civilian status, full federal benefits. You'd work with journalists and law enforcement teams across the country, training them in Elena's techniques while participating in active investigations." "Elena's techniques," I corrected. "This would always be Elena's work. I'd just be carrying it forward." "Understood. There's one more thing." The team leader opened a classified folder. "We've identified corruption networks in 17 additional cities. Conservative estimates suggest Elena's methods could prevent thousands of deaths and save billions in taxpayer money over the next decade." 17 cities. Thousands of potential victims who could be saved if Elena's sacrifice led to systematic change in how law enforcement fought corruption. I thought about Thompson's family, destroyed by choices made in desperation. About Isabella Cruz, murdered for trying to do the right thing. About Elena, tortured to death for refusing to abandon her principles. "When do I start?" The team leader smiled. "Your first assignment is in Miami. Similar corruption patterns to what Elena uncovered here, but involving federal judges and customs officials. The local FBI field office requested specifically for the consultant who'd worked the Morales case. Elena's reputation was already opening doors, creating opportunities to replicate her success in other cities. Her death had been transformed into a weapon against the very corruption that had killed her. As I signed the Phoenix Consultant Agreement, I whispered a promise to Elena's memory. This is just the beginning, love. We're going to save a lot of people. 2 years later, I stood in Elena's old home office, now transformed into a memorial library that housed copies of every investigation she'd completed. The walls were lined with commendations from law enforcement agencies across 17 states, each one representing lives saved by techniques she'd pioneered. The Phoenix Consulting Program had exceeded every projection. Elena's methods had been taught to over 300 law enforcement officers and investigative journalists. Corruption networks in Miami, Detroit, Phoenix, and 14 other cities had been dismantled using the systematic approach she'd developed. But today wasn't about statistics or professional accomplishments. Today was the second anniversary of Elena's death, and I'd come home to remember the woman behind the legend. On her desk sat the final report of the Morales investigation, a thick document that detailed every aspect of the corruption network she'd exposed. The cover page bore her name as primary investigator, with a dedication that read, "For Marcus, who taught me that love and justice are the same thing expressed in different ways." I'd never seen that dedication before the report was officially published. Elena had added it in her final draft, completed just hours before Morales men found her. My phone rang, interrupting the quiet reverence of the memorial space. The caller ID showed a familiar number, Detective Martinez. Now Captain Martinez, after his role in exposing Thompson's corruption, had earned him rapid promotion. "Marcus, we've got something you need to see. Can you come down to the station?" "What kind of something?" "The kind that Elena would have wanted you to handle personally." 20 minutes later, I walked into the police station that had once been poisoned by corruption. The building felt different now, cleaner somehow, as if Elena's sacrifice had purged more than just the dirty cops. New faces filled the desks, young officers who'd been recruited specifically for their integrity and dedication to community service. Martinez met me at the front desk, his captain's bars gleaming in the fluorescent light. "We received a package addressed to you this morning. No return address, but the postmark is from Mexico City." He handed me a manila envelope with my name written in careful cursive handwriting. Inside was a letter and a small digital memory card. The letter was in Spanish, but I'd learned enough during my Phoenix work to understand the basics. It was from Maria Santos, the witness whose location had been compromised by Thompson's information leaks. She'd survived Morales' attempt to silence her and had been living in hiding with her family. Martinez provided the full translation. "Officer Rivera, I know this anniversary must be difficult for you. Elena saved my life by warning me about the leak in your department, even though doing so probably exposed her own investigation to greater danger. She chose to protect a witness she'd never met rather than preserve her own safety." My hands trembled as Martinez continued reading. The memory card contains recordings of conversations between Morales and his lieutenants from the weeks before Elena's death. "She asked me to keep them safe and give them to you if anything happened to her. I've been afraid to surface until now, but Elena's work has made it safe for people like me to come forward." I inserted the memory card into Martinez's computer, and Elena's voice filled the room through speakers she'd hidden in Morales' safe house. Her final undercover operation had captured conversations that revealed the full scope of the conspiracy. But it was the last recording that brought tears to my eyes. Elena's voice, calm and professional, even though she knew she was being hunted. "If Marcus is listening to this, then the investigation was successful and the corruption network has been exposed. I need him to know that everything we built together, our marriage, our partnership, our shared commitment to justice, made this work possible." Her voice paused, and I could hear her take a shaky breath. "Marcus, grief is the price we pay for love, but it's also the proof that love existed. Don't let my death be the end of our story. Let it be the beginning of something bigger." Teach others what we learned together. Show them that ordinary people can fight extraordinary corruption if they're willing to pay the price. The recording ended, but Elena's presence filled the room like a benediction. 2 years after her death, she was still teaching me, still guiding the work we'd started together. Martinez spoke quietly into the silence. There's something else, Marcus. The City Council has approved funding for the Elena Rivera Center for Investigative Excellence. They want you to run it, train journalists and law enforcement officers in the techniques Elena developed. A permanent legacy. Elena's methods would be taught to future generations, ensuring that her sacrifice would prevent corruption long after everyone who knew her personally was gone. She'd have loved that, I said, thinking about Elena's passion for mentoring young reporters. Teaching was always her favorite part of the job. As I drove home that evening, I stopped at Riverside Cemetery to visit Elena's grave one final time as a widowed man searching for closure. Tomorrow, I would begin building the center that would carry her name and her techniques into the future. We did it, Elena, I said to the simple granite headstone. Your work is going to live forever. Corrupt cops in cities we've never heard of are going to face justice because of techniques you developed in our kitchen. Witnesses like Maria Santos are going to be protected by protocols you created while researching stories. The jasmine was blooming again, filling the air with the scent Elena had loved. As I prepared to leave, I noticed something that made me smile. A small notebook tucked behind her headstone, its pages filled with handwritten notes from other investigators who'd come to pay their respects. Elena had become more than a person. She'd become a symbol of the truth that ordinary people could fight extraordinary corruption if they were willing to pay the price. I added my own note to the collection. The story continues. Thank you for teaching me that love and justice are the same thing. Walking away from her grave, I felt something I hadn't experienced since finding Elena's body in our basement. Peace. Not the closure that comes from ending something, but the satisfaction that comes from understanding that some stories are too important to end. Elena's investigation would continue through every corruption network we dismantled, every witness we protected, every young journalist we trained in her methods. Death had ended her life, but it couldn't end her work. The hunt for justice would never stop.